All right, we are back, and it is COMP3025 in the winter 2017 semester at Georgian. That's mobile and pervasive computing, and we are week 9, part 1 of our broadcast. I can't believe it already. We're continuing with the API hunt today. That's what I like to call it, for Ionic Native. Let me just bring that up again. So if you go to Ionic, and if we go to docs, we're looking at Ionic Native, right? And last week we kind of did the camera API, which is kind of useful in terms of some of the stuff we can do today, like not just taking images, like camera images or videos, but actually doing things like scanning barcodes and that kind of thing as well. You can incorporate that in. There's also very popular stuff as device motion and orientation. That's really, really important to kind of detect. But what I really want to hit, and again, this is, I think it's because of how popular it is Google Maps. If you can do a Maps API for Google, then I think it's you've got quite a bit of capacity when it comes to doing things. It's a very popular one to hit as well. We hit it actually in Android and iOS. So we're going to try and look at that. So that's one of the things we're going to try and conquer today. And if you notice, we're going to be doing this. And then for today, I want you to pick, by the end of day today, I want you to pick another API for yourself and try and implement it. Something that's going to be at least doable by the end of the day. Don't try and pick something that's undoable. Native audio might be something you want to try and hit. Native audio is not a bad thing. It kind of gives the audio kind of plug-in, allows you to play sounds, which not a bad one to kind of learn how to do, especially if you want to bring some kind of sound or game sound, that kind of stuff. You may want to do that. Native storage, not a bad idea. Again, I probably would use something like this as a backup for something like Firebase, right? So that's something that we can do here. They also have photo viewer and photo library to kind of complement what we did last week with camera, right? Messaging is really cool too, sending SMSs, that kind of like short messages like that is pretty cool. Turning on things like status bars and that, those kind of things, toasts, anything like that you can see here that they're easy to do. There's some that are really hard to do though, and please don't try and grab one of these beta ones, because these are not always working across platform, and sometimes they're difficult to implement because of the documentation that's out there right now, right? So you can choose any one of the other ones. So I'll put up the lab up on Blackboard shortly. Okay, so that's one. The other thing is that let's talk about your assignment. I'm going to bring it up. If I go into the right place for a second, let me see if I can get this done. Again, it's coming. It's coming. Typically, I give it to you around week 10, but I want to talk about it now around week 9, and I'm gonna modify it as we come forward. Last time I did this final project stuff, I did it with iOS, and I believe I allowed a game app with Unity. Let me take a look here, or Unreal. So this is the game app option. We're going to talk about the dates. Obviously, are going to be different. I'm going to post it today, right? And it won't be worth notice it's the values here, 10, 10, and 15. Each part I will monitor. So I'm going to do a kind of a checkpoint. The dates are wrong, April 4th and 11th and so on, because this is from last year, but the weeks are probably right. Okay. Notice how we have like week 12 is the first game concept and whatever, if you're going to make a game. And then, like it says, you can work in groups or solo to create an original game app. The game can be a scrolling game, a platform game, a simple 3/4 down adventure game, or whatever. You're urged to try and stay away from puzzle type games, as they can be very complex to code. And I mean that by if you try and do a Tetris or something crazy like that, right? You might see you might think that's easy for yourself. Please don't do that. If you're thinking about coding something, make it easy. And don't do a role-playing game. Okay, don't sit there, I want to make an adventure role-playing game. I only have 4 weeks. It's not going to happen. It doesn't matter how many people we throw at it. you're going to be in trouble. So students might create this game using Xcode or native game engine, or they may create this game using standalone game engine like Unity, Unreal, etc. The app must adhere to some basic criteria as described below. And the only thing I'm really asking you guys to make for this one is you must have some kind of splash screen activity, whether it's with Android or iOS. So that's one of the things you need for your game. You need to have some kind of game control screen, right, where you're making some kind of menu or something like that, right? Then there must be some kind of game activity, like game screen, the actual main game or play area. That's what's required. And then finally, you're going to end off with a game end screen. Okay, so there must be a game end screen. So that's why it's a little bit meatier in terms of what you're going to be creating. Can you use Ionic to make this? If you're going to use it, if you're going to make a game, I don't recommend using Ionic native necessarily. You could use something like Create.js combined with Ionic, right? Which isn't a bad combination. It might work. The challenge is deploying it on a device. It's going to be really challenging, right? So that's one of the things that you have to do. There's also an external document that's required for the game, a game document. So I'm gonna require this for the game concept. Like you can't just come up with a, here's my game. No, I want to know what you're doing, right? So that's part of the requirement of the game. Again, you can work alone or in groups. I recommend you work in groups. GitHub is required. And then there's some optional features. For example, adding a boss monster to defeat. There's only one level that you have to make for the game. Like I'm not expecting you to make like 3 levels or something crazy because it's not a game course. This is just a, it's a mobile development course. Now remember, the game must be a mobile game. So please don't make a game that's for desktop, right? Some people have tried to pass that off in the past. You can make it for tablet. That's okay if it's specifically made for tablet. I'm also noticed that the soundtrack isn't required. If you want to add a soundtrack as a bonus, you can do that. Sound effects at appropriate times also is optional. And you might say, well, how come sound effects and all that is optional? Because if you try doing something with Create.js and Ionic, which I might, you might want to try and do, making game sound happen is quite challenging because of the way the touch interface works and permissions. So that's why I made it as a bonus. I left it as a bonus. So I definitely want the idea of this external document is going to be worth something, and your files must be available on GitHub. One of the things I'm also going to ask you to do, if you're using Unity or Unreal, I'm going to ask you to do a WebGL build for Unity, right? So I can play the game from anywhere. All right, so that way when I test it, it's going to be your interface should work with the appropriate size, your screen, but it should be a WebGL build, and we'll talk about that as we go on. Okay, so that's really your game, the game option. And so I'm going to put this up again. When we talk about the final project, there's going to be 3 parts to it, right? So when and then plus the final presentation piece. So this is where it's heavily weighted. Like we've been talking about components all the way through, try and get you ready for this final piece. So an example would be like part 1, if it was due the 12th week, it might be due the 11th week. I don't know yet. But it'll be like the first part. It'll be worth 10%, and there'll be some kind of external game document for the game. And also, give me the menu scene. Show me that first scene that says start, that kind of thing, right? So there's going to be a bit of stuff that you have to kind of take care of for the first piece. And if you notice, each piece is going to be broken out, just like we've done before, to kind of create a, several smaller chunks that, that we can bite into and kind of evaluate, right? Okay, so that's the game option. Again, I'll give you more details around that today. The other option is the utility option. So here's another kind of, let's say you're not a gamer and you want to produce something with your partners, your group. Again, notice it's broken down into 3 weeks, right? You're still going to be required to produce a first draft of the external app document, because the idea that you're making is what I'm looking for is a plan. Give me some wireframes. Tell me what the app's going to look like. Define your screens. I want you to fully define all the screens in your app for this document. It's not going to be a small little document that you're going to be producing. You guys are at the end game now, so you guys should be able to produce wireframes They are only mobile wireframes, obviously, unless if you're going to make it so that the app is responsive, so it works across multiple screens, different sizes, for example, tablet as well as phone, then you really have to plan well. I don't recommend it from a time perspective, not because it's not easy to do or whatever. It's just making an adaptive layout for a utility app can take quite a bit of time and planning, and it may not work out, right? So just putting it out there. So that's part one. Part two would be the first, where it says first working level. Obviously, this isn't first working level. This would be your primary screens and your basic mechanics in place. So again, I'll modify this, but the time frames are the same. And the final one is your finished version, right? So when we say part one, part two, part three, we're talking about releases. So your first runnable release will be probably running around week 12 or 13. Okay, that's what I'm looking for. Okay. So what are you making? You can work in groups or solo to create an original utility app of their choice. Now, when I say original, I don't mean like it can't be on the App Store. I mean, if you want to duplicate something that's already out there, that's within reason, you can do that. But there's some requirements here. The app must have a prime purpose. Example, something like a calorie counting app, and or a tutorial app, or a cookbook recipe app, or an alarm clock app, or something, right? Now I'm asking for, because utility apps are a little easier than games, right? And you're working in groups. What I'm really looking at is polish for this one. I'm not looking at a cheesy 2-second slap together app to create a, some kind of alarm clock. That's not what I'm looking at all, right? And that won't really suffice, because remember, you're gonna work with a group of 2 or 3 people and you're gonna make 3 screens? No, right? The app must be unique and cannot be a modification of an existing app, right? So in other words, don't try and take an app that that you've already made and modify it and kind of hand it in. That's what I mean, right? The app must adhere to some basic criteria as described below. Please keep in mind that the final presentation will be used in place of a final exam will be depending on this app being complete. It's the same thing for the game app, that there will be a final presentation where you present what you've done kind of in this course. There is kind of a reflection piece, and this is one of them. Now that you're getting into this higher level, the recommendations, the requirements are you need to have a little bit of essential employability skills, right? That we're testing you on, which is make a good presentation. So part of the presentation is going to be based on your presentation skills, which means the ability for you to stand up in the class and speak, clearly, loudly, that kind of stuff. And the other part is going to be materials. So you need some kind of materials to sign up with. Please don't stand up and just ad lib. That would not suffice for this presentation, all right? You're not going to sell me like a salesperson, all right? You're trying to pitch your app. That's what it is. And it's going to be a bit of a pitch that I want you to do, which means your presentation has to be very well thought out, right, with you and your partners. Not everyone has to be up there, okay? So I'm not going to require in this presentation all of you to stand up and a bunch of you just to put your hands in your pockets, okay? That's not going to suffice. Whoever's going to sell it has to know their product, okay? So I want you to come up, speak to your product, be prepared. Even if you read a script or whatever, we're going to be talking about that. Okay, so that's part of what you're going to be doing with the presentation piece, which is going to be outside of this app, another 10% or something like that. So what do you need? You need a splash screen, just like we did with the utility, the game. Some kind of main app interface activity, some kind of secondary interface activity, like options, an option screen, or some kind of other modifier that modifies the other screens, right? That accesses data, right? For example, some kind of detailed screen or an option screen, or performs an alternate function, something else that the main screen doesn't perform. I just need 2, right? That's why it's a little easier to do this one than it is to do a game, right? However, I'm looking for many more wireframes than I am from a planning perspective than and more planning when it comes to this. What I'd also like to see this deployed at least on one device, right? So when you're deploying, I didn't ask for device deployment from the game. I don't need it to necessarily be deployed to a device. It'd be nice so I can see it, but it'd be, as long as you make it for a game, you're good. The reason why is because games deploying on devices, that's a whole other issue, right? So that's why I'm not requiring it. But for this one, we're going to be talking about when you do your presentation, there's some software that I recommend that you download, right? Even if it's trial software to show me what it looks like, how it works when you demo your app. Okay, so there's gonna be a big piece of that. And that's gonna be all second part of semester, right? This part here. Some kind of, let me see, so example, we get some examples here. Main app interface would be user interface that will display the main functionality of the app and allow the user to either enter information to be manipulated. Example, the calorie counting app. Remember, when I say calorie counting app, that sounds like it's a very simple thing. It is not a very simple thing, all right? Think about the functionality here. When you present your concept to me, right, and if it's a very basic calorie counter, like all you do is put calories and it counts, well, what is it counting? It's got to keep track of something, right? Which means you need to keep track of data, right? Calorie counting is all around show me trends, right? And that means you need some kind of backend, right? That's why it's more challenging to do this piece, right? It sounds easy, but not easy. And so, for example, maybe it's going to display information that is stored in the app, right? A cookbook app is another example of that, where you might have recipes, several recipes that you're going to access through data, like, for example, through Firebase. Again, I recommend Firebase as a good backend. It's going to make it a little easier than using SQLite or something like that. The alarm clock might seem the easiest, but actually what I'm looking for is for it to work. If the alarm clock doesn't have an alarm, right, that would be bad, right? I mean, that would not work, right? You need to have an alarm clock. It has to be a clock, several alarms, that would have to be set, and maybe other things like trends, when you got up, when you went to sleep, those kind of things. There's got to be some extra pages in there, which makes this, it might seem trivial when you first look at it, but actually any one of these little apps is actually quite challenging to put together. That's why you need a team of about 2 to 3 people at minimum. I will accept teams of up to 4 on any one of these applications, either the game app or this one, because of the planning involved, the deployment on the devices, the number of weeks you have to spend on this thing, and the percentage of evaluation marks that is going to be handled with this thing. This is where it's a good opportunity for you and your partners to get together to eat this stuff. Again, secondary interfaces, I just kind of talked about it. Internal documentation for sure. I definitely want all the authors' names and all that kind of stuff all over the place. External document, you must have a company logo, table of contents, full description of your app, several labeled sketches and wireframes of your app's activities, and several screenshots of your app's activities. All right, so all those things that your app does, you must have that. It's worth 14 marks, so it's not something small, right? That's part of your external documentation, right? Of course, it must be up on GitHub, and it must be deployed on a device, and we'll talk about that as we get closer. Optional app features. The app uses an external database, right? It's optional. Why is it optional? Even though I'm saying data store, it could be something that's on the device. Remember, you're mocking it up. It's a prototype. Best case, right? Even if you spend 4 weeks on it with 4 people, it's still going to be a prototype at the end of the day. You're not going to be ready for production. It's not going to be ready, most likely, to be put up on the App Store. Although I know in the past, I have some of my classes have put the app up on Google Play because it's fast and dirty to put it up. It doesn't cost much, $25 as a developer, and you're good to go. We can't use our university account that we have. We have a university account for Apple that allows, this is what it's called, that allows you to develop, but it won't allow you to put things on the App Store. You need to have your own. That's $99 a year, actually $119 here in Canada, right? Because of the exchange rate. And for you to sign up and everything else, it's going to be a bit of money. Your app includes additional activities, more screens, basically. For example, if you're calorie counting, maybe you have weight loss tracking as well. YouTube videos that display inside the tutorial app, nutritional information displays when recipes are created, stopwatches for your alarm app, those kind of things, other functionalities. If you have additional screens, I'm going to give you bonus points for those things. And again, we're going to break this out in terms of total points. So I wanted to bring this to you. I will post these again later today, hopefully during the class when we take a bit of a break. So any questions around this stuff or concerns? Okay. When we talk about the presentation, so again, notice that it's worth 10, 10, and 15. That's worth 35% of your final grade, broken up over several smaller assignments, if you think about it, because each release would be equivalent of an assignment. So it's not like one big monster. What happens worst case? And I have to talk about these worst cases because it happens every single semester that I teach. What happens if you hate your partners after you do the first piece, right? And you want to move to another project, right? As long as you put your name on the first one and you've contributed to the concept or whatever, and you don't feel like doing that anymore, and you want to move to somebody else's team, and they have room, and they will accept you without me prompting them or telling them that they must accept you, I'm okay with that, right? But if you kind of sit there and go like, my team rejected me, and I don't know what to do now, Tom. No, that's on you, right? So, please don't wait to start this off. This takes some time. We're sitting at week 9. We don't have a lot of time. It sounds like we have like plenty of time, but that's why I'm going to start, metering what you're producing, right? So that way we can get this thing going. Let's also talk, since we're here, about the final presentation for a second. So here's the final project would be due week 14. Final presentation is also a really big part of this. And again, what I'm looking for is it's really due week 14. It's probably going to be, replacing your exam, which is going to be worth another 20%. Like there's like 55% of your grade, right? That we're talking about over these next several weeks, right? But it's all based on what you're building with your team. So it's not like you're going to do this alone. If you are someone who loves to work alone or cannot work with another team member, that's really crazy, guys. Like, I don't know whoever you are, pick a partner, find somebody, because this is not for the lighthearted these next few weeks, okay? And today, I have to also mention, because administratively, this is the last day to drop the course, right, effectively. So if you're looking at, like, you cannot produce this work by the end of week 14, impossible, and you're not interested in doing the work, this is the last day. I don't want anyone to drop my course, but this is the last day officially to do that. So let's talk about this presentation a little bit. I've broken it down into PowerPoint slides or slide deck, because again, you're trying to sell your app, whether it's a game app or utility app. That's what you're doing here. So there's 2 parts. There's materials and presentation value that I'm metering you on, right? So it's not going to be just on materials. You've seen this before if you've done presentations for me in the past. I will also allow you, because as we're entering the last part of semester, there may be people that are away, like going away for, to travel or leaving early or whatever, and that's possible. But you must be here for this presentation. This is not something you can screencast away or anything like that. Not this one. There's not that many people in the class, so we can probably get away with doing 4, 5, 6 presentations, let's say, and getting it done. I will have a presentation sign up as we get closer to the time, right? So you need to have some kind of materials. Now, some people have asked me in the past, should I use or could I use Prezi? Not recommended. I don't think it's a good vehicle for doing a pitch. It takes it's out of scope for a lot of you, because it takes a lot of effort to put together a really good Prezi presentation. I don't know if you guys have seen that at all. You must have seen it by now. Yes? Anyone not see Prezi? It's neat. It gives you some kind of like more interactive kind of presentation value. I don't recommend. I think stick to some kind of slide deck might be better. If you're making a game, please don't make it so business-like. Okay, I don't need it to be a business-like kind of presentation. I need it to be a little bit more fun, because you're pitching a game, right? For the utility app, though, you are going to make it business-like. That's the alternative, right? Which means you need some slide deck, but the slide deck's going to be very different between different projects, right? I expect it to be professional. I don't want you to pick a slide deck from the PowerPoint default. I want you to make your own. So color the slides, make them look like your own. Make sure that there's a logo on them for your company. Give yourself a little bit of presentation value here. This is where 20% of your final grade. All right, so it's not something that's going to be taken lightly. Again, unless there's some kind of medical emergency, you must do this with your team and present it and be part of it, because it replaces your exam. You must be physically present on the day of when we're presenting, which would be the Wednesday of the last week that we're here. Okay. If you're going to come late that day, that would be bad. Okay, I'm letting you know that would be like a failing your exam kind of day. Okay, so it's important, and you cannot leave early. Okay, you can't say, "Oh, I've done my presentation, Tom. I'm out of here. I got to work." No. If you're presenting, I'm telling you way in advance. I'm talking about this in week 9, right? So you can plan nicely. Do not plan to be away for that day. Leave early, come late, or anything like that. I will not accept you in the class past the half-an-hour mark for that day. Okay, it's not fair to people that are going to be here who are presenting. And for you to leave, it's quite rude for you to leave and not watch other people's presentations, that they've taken the time to present their app and all that kind of stuff, right? So just letting you know way in advance here that this is not acceptable behavior. For most of you, I don't have any problem. I mean, I don't think there's going to be any issue with you coming in and doing everything you need to do. But there's always the one person or two people that decide that it's okay to miss their final exam, and they think they're going to get marks because they're part of a team, but they don't physically here for their final presentation. And the answer is you'll get 0, right? Even if you don't present. It's not just, it's being here, asking the question, being engaged. I'm looking for those things on the final day, asking the questions, being interested in what's happening, not playing with your computer, not playing video games or anything else, or looking up news or whatever. It's here to pay attention and kind of get something out of this thing. You're paying for this course, right? So that's what the final presentation is all around. How do we present live with apps? One of the things I got to talk about way in advance, and again, I recommend that you buy this if you can, or share the cost with your team, you can use something called Reflector. And I think Reflector 2 might be one of the ways you can kind of stream your app. Let me pull it up. So this product is one by Air Squirrels. It's $15. Okay, we're not talking about a large amount of money here. $5 a person, you're good to go, right? Please don't try and steal this app or try and download it from somewhere. It may not work, especially the latest versions. I think it's reasonable. There's also pricing for education. If you look through here, so it's just take a look, right, for what you're doing. I mean, you might have a way of doing it nearly for free, okay? Both works on iOS and Android, and what it does is it allows you to project your app physically on the screen. Okay, here's what I don't want you to do. I don't want you to download Air Squirrels on the day of on the day of presentation, okay? Which means you have to actually physically try this thing out and practice ahead of time. If I see you coming up and not presenting your app, you're going to lose marks. Because we can't look at your phone. You can't just go, hey, look, here's my phone and it works. Let's pass my phone around so you can see what my app looks like. I want to see it live. I want to see it working, whether it's a game or something else. Now, games are a little bit trickier because doing a game physically up online with some kind of projection technology is really hard. So what I'm going to ask you to do if you're going to do a game is actually play it within Unity or play it within Unreal. That would work, right? But for the phone, you need to have some kind of, for your utility, you need to have some kind of app. My recommendation is Reflector 2. There are other apps out there that will project your phone physically on the screen, and you don't have to have a Mac, okay? This is one of the better ones. I've used many of them, and this one actually is more reliable. The challenge when it comes to using Reflector 2, I'm just gonna put it out there way ahead of time again, is that you need to be connected to the computer as well as to the same Wi-Fi. So you may have to use a hotspot or something like that for it to work, okay? I can't show you it so easily because I'm projecting and I'm broadcasting and everything else. So being on a hotspot when I'm doing that would be very bad for my data. I don't know why, but Canada, we don't have unlimited data plans, not all of us, for mobile. In the States, it's totally possible. You can go and get from every bloody provider, yeah.
You actually download ISL Lite. I think it's free, and you can mirror
whatever it is, whatever app you want to use, go ahead. But I think it's a good idea to plan and try it. So don't just sit there and go, I'm going to do it on the very last day of class. So I've never tried this out before, and you know what, Tom, I don't know if it's going to work, and here's my presentation. You come in like that, there's going to be a mark loss for materials, right, and presentation value. Again, all this will be clearly laid out in your documentation. Okay, so this is important to think about how it's going to look on screen. Again, imagine that you're pitching this to a client and you want to show them the screens and all that kind of stuff. It's important. Also, from one of the things that we've been using for a UI UX perspective to develop wireframes. And if you're someone who is a Mac person, this is fantastic. Sketch is probably the app that you want to use, which is a professional designer for wireframes. There is an educational version. It's half price. Again, if you're someone who wants to work with your team of people, between 3 people, I think you're pretty good splitting the cost, right? If you're going to do an educational version, there's also a trial version if you want to do a few things. The only thing with the trial version is it doesn't export the wireframes, right? So that would be very bad. but it's really kind of cool, you know, for you to have access to it. And what it does is the reason why it's so good is because it has defaults for dragging and dropping your interfaces. And it works really great with something called Flinto, right? So if I was to go to Flinto, again, another one for, you know, for the Mac, there's also Flinto Lite. What you can do is do a prototype, a click-through, without actually doing any kind of coding whatsoever. So, and they have a, here with Sketch and Flinto, they have a workflow where you can actually create your wireframes, and then they will transmit 100% to Flinto for prototyping. This would be great when you're demonstrating your concept to me, right? So again, remember, concept A is not just your external document. It's like, hey, this is what my prototype is going to look like. There's one other prototyping software which I also recommend. I think it's called Marvel, believe it or not. Marvel Prototype. Now this is free. This is really cool, right? So you can actually do a kind of your prototypes with Marvel, right? And you can sign up for free. And what it does is it creates almost like a click-through, right? See if I can, hopefully there's no sound on this thing. Otherwise I'll get killed, right? And maybe it's not going to work. You see? Yeah. Anyways, let's refresh that screen so it doesn't kill me. Sometimes I'll get like some broadcasting on YouTube is an issue. But one of the things you can do, like I said, is with Marvel, there is you know, the ability for you to do a click through. You can actually take pictures of the prototype. You can do a paper prototype with Marvel, which is kind of cool, right? So let's say, for example, you take an image, you take some cardboard, right? Like literally your paper. You sketch out what your app is going to look like physically with paper, right? And then you take a picture of it. You can actually do an animation that's actually clickable with the Marvel app, right? And you can download. I believe there's an app through the App Store or Google Play that you can download and install. It kind of install this kind of stuff. And if you look at features for what it does, it's not just for prototyping. You can use it for collaboration. But the great thing is, like, you literally sketch out your app physically, and then you can kind of, you know, do a click through. And of course, there's a nice Slack integration, which you can use with Marvel. So take a look at that. That's something that we'll be looking at as we get closer when it comes to prototyping. Remember, there really is not a UI UX component of this course. This is assuming that you've done some kind of UI UX in the past. Have you guys done anything? We've talked about it in my courses, but have you guys done anything like that? I know there is a UI UX component on the website. No? Any kind of user interface design? So for you, I mean, am I asking for you to be, you know, crazy UI UX designers? No, but you need to have, again, just to recap, you need some kind of projection capability to show me your app, right? You need to have some kind of wireframes, and you can use some kind of method of doing that. Sketch and Flinto are the most popular Mac apps. You can also use Illustrator or Photoshop to do the same job, or any other free apps that are out there. Krita is another app that's free that you can use that does that kind of stuff as well, right? But it's just a matter of, there's a lot of built-in features that'll save you time with these apps. That's why I'm presenting them. Any questions about your final presentation and project that's due, again, in several pieces over the next coming weeks? This would be the time to ask, and then I can clarify for everybody else. I know you guys are going to have questions later on. It's going to happen, right? Because this is the kind of questions that I normally get. So, Tom, can I work in a group of 5 or 6? No, the answer is no, right? Please don't ask me for 5 or 6 people. Tom, can I work alone? The answer is yes, you can work alone, but I don't recommend it at all, right? I'm not going to force you. I'm not going to push you to be with somebody else, but I don't recommend it. Tom, I don't have a partner, and I don't want to work alone. Can you push me onto another group? The answer is no. I'm not going to push you on with any other group. If you can't find a partner, I can't make you have a partner with somebody else, right? And the reason for that is when I force people to be partners with other people, and I've explained this in the past, it's usually negative on me, right? Because then it's on me if it doesn't work, right? And I don't want that, right? It's got to be on you when it comes to you picking who your partners are. In real life, you won't have a choice about picking who you're working with most times. And sometimes you're going to get someone who just doesn't work. Tom, my partner's not working with me. I've tried to get together with him, her daughter, her mother, her brother, her sisters, her dog is impeding her from getting to work. She's working. She can't come to class. She can't come and help me, or he can't come and help me. What can I do? Fire them is the answer, right? And what I mean by that is there must be a way of you talking to your partner and saying, making an agreement when you guys get together and saying, here's when we're meeting. Here are the regular meeting times we're going to have. We're going to spend X number of hours a week on this thing. Not so many times, right? Because you don't want to have, it's not like the only thing you're doing this semester, right? So you need to kind of arrange for this. And, you know, I want to make it so that it is doable, right? So, you know, what if the person's not producing and they've asked you, for example, I don't know, I'm working with, I'm going to use, you know, someone who's not here. Let's say Mike. We're working with a guy named Mike, right? And Mike promised me to produce wireframes for my concept because that's one, he's doing 3 of the 5 wireframes for my concept that's due next week, right? I've been trying to get a hold of Mike, but I can't get a hold of him. And no matter how many times I try, he doesn't answer. He doesn't answer his Slack messages and he doesn't come to class. And I'm really concerned that my wireframes aren't going to be done for class. What should I do? Right? Well, first, talk to me about it, right? Talk to Tom, right? That's what I would recommend, right? A, I can't get a hold of my partner, right? B, and don't do it like, you know, a day before the assignment's due. That would be very bad. That's on you again, right? Like you waited till the last day to kind of get together with your partner to do your assignment. That's not going to do, right? Talk to them way in advance and say, look, this is how it is. And if they don't answer, fire them. Fire them early, right? Right? And what I mean by that is like, say to me, like, you know, I signed up with Mike, but guess what? Mike's not showing up, right? So I'm not going to work with Mike anymore, right? Okay, you're in your first part. They did the concept with you and everything else. They're supposed to deliver some kind of asset. They're supposed to do some kind of programming and they're not showing up. You can't meet with them, whatever. Fire them again, right? That's why there's different parts to this whole thing, right? They don't produce, right? Just let them be known that they're not going to get free marks. This is not a free ride, you know, for this kind of thing. And I mean, when I mean fire them, please be gentle when you do it. Just say something like, you know what, this isn't working out. You know, you haven't delivered. Again, now it's on you if you wait for the last day to fire them. If you wait for the last day, then it's on you. Firing them at the last day and getting mad and sending me Slack messages at the 11th hour is it's not going to work for anybody, right? So that's something that's a negative. Or what if the person wants to leave? You know, Tom, I had a partner. It was me and one other person, and they've decided to split from me. They've divorced me, right? Or they fired me. What do I do? Right? Well, there's a reason why they divorced or fired you, right? It's maybe because you guys don't work together, right? Things aren't working nicely or whatever. You got to kind of move on from there. Can I build the same app that I built the concept for in phase 1? And the answer is sure. Build the same app, right? But from now on, you're on your own. So your code has got to look different than theirs. This is a different code base that you're working with, right? Or what if you come to stage 2, right? So you've done part 1 and part 2, but now people don't want to work with you for part 3. That's where it becomes a little difficult. I'm going to allow people to be fired before part 1. I'll allow people to be fired before part 2, but I won't allow people to be fired after part 2. Once you've got your partners and they're with you for part 2, they're with you for the rest of the semester, right? Because it's hard for you to jump around. Okay, I've done some coding, I've done some concepting, I've partnered with my team, we brainstormed things out, and now I don't feel like being with them anymore. You know, for the final run, I'm not going to be around. That means when you're not around for any part, you get 0. That's what it comes down to, right? There will be a couple of exercises we'll be doing around, you know, along this. I'm not going to just let you go and go, hey, go ahead, and then just hand things in and see you later. I can't operate like that. In the past, it's come back to bite me, right? So I'm not going to do that. I will be doing things like test your app day. Show your other groups the app that you've already built and get them to test it. So if you're not ready for that testing the app day, then, you know, you're not going to complete that lab, right? That's kind of stuff. So there's going to be activities throughout this time. Here's another question that's going to happen. I'm Tom. I'm currently doing a capstone project, and I'm working on app A, B, C, D with my partners. Can I use the app that I'm building for my capstone project for this course? Well, the answer is it depends. And I'm going to put it out there for you because I don't want to make it so difficult, because this is not the only project course you're doing, right? You're doing this other one, your capstone project, yeah? So what if you're building a game for your capstone project? Can you also hand it in for me, right? And the answer is yes, you can. So this is where the advantage is going to be. However, with the proviso that you meet my criteria, right? If you meet my criteria for my app, if you do 3 screens, so a main menu, a gameplay screen, and a game over screen, and all the other things you need to do, you're golden. I don't care how you do it, right? And if you can kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone, so you do it for your game course, because you have a game course coming up, right? You have a a gaming course that you're doing right now. What is it called? Is there a gaming course? Gaming simulation, right? You're doing that one, right? So what if you have to do some kind of final project for there? Right. So I want this course not to interfere with your game. Maybe you want to do a mobile version of your game if you've been planning something for desktop, right? That might be something. You can reuse the same assets that you're using for your game today, and you can present it in Unreal, right? You don't have to do it with Unity. I have to warn you, however, if you're going to do a mobile game, please make it playable. Yeah, I got to put it out there. I mean, I've had it in the past where they've made a game, people have made a game, and it's unplayable on a computer. Like there's so many assets, or it's not optimized, so you cannot physically play the game. If I can't play your bloody game, I can't test it. If I can't test it, I can't mark you, right? So don't make it unplayable. Don't download every asset from the asset store or from Unreal Marketplace or whatever you're going to do, so that way I can't play your game. That's just not doable. Or what about if you're doing a capstone project and your capstone project is some e-commerce site, as an example, and you want to make an app that tags into your e-commerce site so you actually have some functionality? Please see me for any of those things. All right, like if you have any kind of thing you want to do that's different than the things that I've mentioned and it seems reasonable, I will accept these concepts ahead of time, way ahead of your concept time. Don't wait till the week that your concept is due to ask me whether this is okay. Ask me ahead of time, like maybe by next week, right, would be good, right? I'm telling you week 9, right? Especially I'm supposed to give you this week 10, but I'm telling you way ahead of time so you can do your planning, right? So these are the kind of questions I normally get for this kind of thing. Okay, anything else at all before we continue? I wanted to really present this to you nicely because I don't want to kind of talk about this again. It takes up a little bit of time to talk about project time and everything else. And I think I want to kind of take a small break right now and talk about other things, right? But I wanted to really focus fully on what's due by week 14. Okay, so let's take a short break. When we come back, we'll get right into Ionic for the remainder of the class.